Have you been diagnosed with ADHD? But do you also have a large amounts of trauma? And are you also deeply tapped into your spiritual being? Like you can feel other people's energy, you have a big intuition, you maybe can see things before they happen, etc. You may be like me and were too quickly diagnosed and medicated before we get to the root of the actual issue. The list goes on and on of the medication that I took, but there was a part of me that was being completely looked over, which was my spiritual side and my spiritual gifts. So the medicine only worked temporarily, and when I took the medicine, it also cut off my connection to spirit. So I was unable to do my mediumship work. I was unable to do my energetic work. And I was like, what is going on? I love the fact that yes, my mind is quiet. Yes, I can focus on my tasks. Yes, I feel better, but I'm no longer able to do the things that I was doing before. I can't do readings with people. I can't do mediumship work with people. I can't hear my inner guidance system. So what is going on? And then I found out it was basically stifling my connection to God. So when I stopped taking my medicine, my connection came back, but so did all of my symptoms. And I kept asking myself, am I going to have to choose between my spiritual path and my practical path? Like, how in the world can I continue my practice and live in my authenticity while still being a functioning human being in society? Because if you have ADHD, you know it's hard to keep up with tasks, to focus. It's hard to keep your house clean, not get overstimulated because there's so much going on up here. The list goes on and on. But essentially what was happening was I had so much trauma stored in my body, and I have such a hyperactive mind on top of being tapped into the spiritual realm that I felt like I was genuinely going crazy. And when I decided to stop taking my medication, I had to deep dive into what it was to live in my overactive mind and my overactive spiritual senses and get to the root of what was causing me to be in overload all the time. Because now I don't live like that. Hey, I haven't been medicated in 3 years, and it's quiet up here. My house is clean. My tasks are done. I have a routine that I stick to. I don't feel rejected. My confidence is the highest that it's ever been. I still can do my spiritual work. I still can do my mediumship work. I feel deeply connected to myself. I feel deeply connected to God. I feel deeply connected to my partner, to my child. And I have never lived like that. And again, I'm not medicated. And before the ADHD meds, I was on antidepressants. I was on anti-anxiety meds. I mean, I have been medicated since I was 14. I'm a completely different human being, and I'm not medicated. I just got to the root of the issue that was more of a spiritual and traumatic issue and not so much a mental issue. I was told over and over again that this was all ADHD. It was all ADHD. It was all ADHD. It wasn't. It was a mix of large amounts of trauma, a hyperactive brain, because my brain is active. It can be loud up here. It holds on to information well. I'm analytical, and I'm very, very spiritual. So I was getting downloads. I was getting pings from the universe. I was hearing other people. I was picking up other people's energy. I was picking up people on the other side, all at the same time, and it was labeled ADHD. But whenever I went back inside and I healed some stuff, and I sat with my thoughts, and I sorted some stuff out, and I released some things, and I connected to my inner divinity, and I connected to spirit, and I started to realize what was my voice, what was other people's voice, what was spirit's voice, what was passed on people on the other side's voice. I was able to sift through it and understand myself and do some spiritual hygiene and realized, oh, I can get to the bottom of this, and I can live a pretty normal life and feel better and not be medicated. I had so much trauma trapped in my body. I had so many spiritual gifts that I didn't have under control. I have a very analytical brain, and all of these things whirling together was basically making me feel psychotic. And the ADHD meds did help temporarily. And if you're anything like me, you know, they only last a little bit, and then you got to keep upping your dose, upping your dose, upping your dose till you're a fucking zombie. And on top of upping my dose, it was cutting off my connection to spirit. I wasn't able to do my gift. I wasn't able to tap into my gifts. I wasn't able to do the things that I had been doing for months on end. That was a big price to pay for me. That was a big price to pay for me. But when I got to the root of the trauma, and I realized that my little trap's getting bigger. When I realized that I hadn't faced some of these things that I had been carrying since I was 7 years old, and it was staying in my body and it was staying in my mind, when I didn't realize that I was taking in everybody's energy, whenever I was listening to everybody's story, and if you're empathetic and you're like me, you know what that feels like. You take on everything. And then it plays in your head because maybe your brain's hyperactive. So it plays in your head over and over. It loops, and then other people's stuff loop. And then if you don't have a lot of confidence and you have a big rejection wound, which is also a sign of ADHD, like feeling hyper rejected. But if you have a rejection wound at the core of who you are, of not being accepted for who you are fundamentally, and you've been on this search to figure out what's wrong with you, you can get to the bottom of that wound and the rejection won't feel so bad. And you can build your confidence up higher, and you can actually put yourself out there and not always feel like the rug's going to be ripped out from underneath you. When I got to the root of why I was buying so many things, there were root causes to everything that I was doing. But every time that I went to therapy, or every time that I went to talk to somebody, they just wanted to give me a pill. But there were root causes that I could get to the bottom of, that would alleviate this enough to where I wouldn't have to be medicated. And then there was a spiritual side of it that had nothing to do with the scientific or medical side of it, that they were completely overlooking. I couldn't necessarily look at every single one of my therapists and be like, hey, I'm a medium. Like, I hear dead people. Like, I talk to dead people. They might would have put me on an antipsychotic. So there was a whole side of me that was being completely overlooked in all of these diagnoses. My partner will tell you, we would go into like crowds. And this was before I realized all of this. We would go into crowds. We would go into farmers markets. We would go into spaces. And I would be like, we gotta go. It was so overwhelming. My brain would go from 0 to 1,000. It was like I could smell colors. Like everything was so intense, and I hated being in crowds. I hated being around people. And it's because I didn't realize how open all of my channels were, because I wasn't in charge of them. I had not taken back my power. I had not stepped into my divinity. I had not stepped into my soul essence. So I was basically just an open canvas for anybody and everything to enter. My energy was just an open circuit for anybody and anything to get into. And I always felt overwhelmed, overstimulated. I couldn't even wear certain things. Like if certain fabrics touched me for too long, I would go crazy. I mean crazy. I would be like, you know that feeling of just something touching you that you don't like, and you gotta like, I don't feel like that anymore. Do you know I can listen to my partner chew? I ain't never in my life. It overstimulated the shit out of me. Now it don't bother me. That is insane to me. It was a huge mix of trauma, neglect. I do have a hyperactive mind, and spiritual gifts. Trauma, neglect, hyperactive mind, spiritual gifts. And all that I was really ever helped with was the hyperactive mind with a pill. Some of the trauma and neglect was helped in therapy, some of it, but just how my brain works and how analytical I am and how hyper aware I am about things. If we can't get to the root of everything, I don't feel like we're doing anything. And by completely neglecting my spiritual side, I wasn't getting anywhere in therapy. I knew I had gifts. I knew I was intuitive. I knew that I was tapped into the spiritual realm. I knew that this was part of my being, my soul being, and it was completely overlooked in therapy. It was completely overlooked in scientific terms. It was completely overlooked in the medical field, which I understand. I really do understand that. But we're not getting to the root of what is going on with me by overlooking this part of me, which is so ingrained in who I am as a human being. So I started doing my own deep dive in my spirituality and sifting out my spiritual gifts and diving into spiritual hygiene, figuring out what works with me, meditation, sitting in silence, sitting with my thoughts, sifting through my trauma, sifting through my subconscious, deep dove into healing myself to the point of where I told myself I'll never have to pick up another pill again. I'll never have to clock into another 9 to 5 again. I will never have to live in this paradigm anymore because it was not built for me and I don't feel comfortable in it and haven't. I could not believe that was just how my brain worked and that was the end of it. I had just read Think and Grow Rich, and although I was putting those practices to my financial world, there's a part in it where he talks about this child being born without the ability to hear, and how his parents put in his head that was just temporary and that was not something he was going to have to live with forever. And I kept telling myself, if I can apply this knowledge to finances, I'm going to apply this to my brain as well. And I'm going to continuously tell myself over and over again that I don't have to live like this, that I'll have a quiet mind, that I can experience peace, and that I don't have to live in this paradigm of hyperactivity in the brain constantly. So that was the first step, continuously telling myself over and over again that I don't have to live like that. The second step was sitting alone in huge quantities, alone in silence in huge quantities, and listening to it. Instead of trying to drown it out, instead of trying to avoid it, because I had done that for years and years and years, I sat with it and I listened to it. And I was able in these moments to sift through little me, hurt me, present me, and spirit. What was anxiety? What was fear? What was frustration? What was the root of the things that were replaying in my head over and over and over again? And I realized it was all of the versions of me that had come before this version of me that never felt heard. And if nobody else heard them, honey, I was going to hear them. And I heard them all the time up here. I just didn't realize that's what it was until I could pattern recognize that, oh, this comes up around this time. This comes up around this trigger. This comes up around this feeling. Oh, this is me. This is me screaming at the top of my lungs to be heard, because I was never heard. I was never validated. I was never looked in the eyes and told, I'm listening to you. What do you need? So she was screaming, honey. And for however many years, I had been avoiding her through listening to podcasts, listening to music, watching TV, numbing out in any way that I could to avoid these feelings and avoid these thoughts, because it was something that was taught to me at a young age. I'm not listened to. I'm not heard. I'm not validated. So I continued these patterns with myself. And then once I could sift through all of these patterns and I could go through and I could soothe these versions of me, it got a little bit lighter up here. And I realized when something came up, it was her. And I could go back inside and I could say, hey, it's okay. Why are you feeling like that? This is just a trigger. We don't live there anymore. I got you. And eventually these triggers or these thought processes or these loops started to slow down. Okay. And then whenever I would go out in public, I started to pattern recognize, oh, I'm getting a ping about this and about this and about this and about this. My channel is opened. I have a channel, and whenever I do one-on-ones with people and that channel is open, I never closed it. I didn't realize there were spiritual practices that need to be in place in order to keep you safe if you have a very hyperactive channel, which I did. So when I went into public spaces, I was hearing people's passed on loved ones. I was hearing people's thoughts. I was feeling people's energy. I was feeling people's aura. And I had no clue, because in the practical world, this is taboo. This isn't real. This is just magic. This is just woo-woo. But it is. It is very much real. And I wasn't aware of that. I had just been gaslit my entire life to think that I was a crazy woman. And I'm not. I have a lot of gifts, and I have a lot of things that I have a lot of senses and a lot of clairs that are constantly open, that if I don't take the time to close and to be aware of, everyone's energy will stick to me. If you are empathetic and you have these spiritual gifts, you probably walk around feeling just completely bogged down because everyone's energy is sucking on you. And then you get overstimulated, and then cloth starts to feel weird, noises start to feel too loud, you start to like on top of, if you haven't got to the root of your own thought processes, now you have that going on. And then if you're constantly listening to music and you have a hyperactive mind and you're listening to music to drown things out, your brain is going to grab things that is like novel to it, and now it's thrown in there. So the first step is getting to the trauma, going back in, healing some stuff, listening to yourself. The second step is deep practice of spiritual hygiene, cutting off your clairs to the entire outside world to be sucking off of you, allowing space for your brain to think, to reset, not filling every single gap with something. I was really, really bad about this. Anytime that I had a free space, I was scrolling, I was listening, and I didn't realize it was opening a tab, opening a tab, opening a tab, opening a tab, because I have a hyperactive brain. I'm not dismissing that. I do have a hyperactive brain. I'm very analytical. Things stay on repeat up here if I don't let it go. Or if I'm over driving, or if I'm over consuming. I have to be very, very, very honest with myself about, am I listening to too much? But this is also a superpower. Okay, this is a superpower. This is, you can get to your subconscious and you can make it believe whatever it is that you want it to believe, which will then reflect in your outward reality. So if your brain is hyperactive like mine is and it catches things, listen to things that will propel you on repeat. I listen to manifestation music, high frequency music, people who are manifesting money. I listen to just very high high vibrational podcasts where people are talking about success and metaphysics and the things that I believe. I listen to people who have gifts like me to affirm to me that I'm not alone. I have basically warped my mind through YouTube, through things like this, into understanding and believing fundamentally that we're not alone, there's nothing wrong with us, and that our future is bright, essentially. That's what these affirmations are, and these moments where you are engulfing yourself in things that you believe to be true. But if you're always listening to negative stuff, if you're always listening to vulgar stuff, if you're always seeing violence on a screen, I mean, I'm not putting down these things as just bad, but if that's what your brain is seeing constantly, you have a powerful brain, baby. You have a powerful brain, and if these are the things that it's seeing and holding on to constantly, it's going to reflect in your reality because you're that powerful. So be very intentional with what you're consuming with this, because it is a powerhouse. And then I quit my job. I talk about it a lot on here. I quit my job because I needed the space to be able to do this. I came first. I knew that I was giving my life away to a company, to a job, to this amount of time every single day, to something that didn't care about me and that deep down I really didn't care about, which wasn't fair either. And I had spent my entire life caring for other people. I had spent my entire life showing up for other people. I had spent my entire life doing something for everyone other than me. And I knew I had to, for the first time, put me first. And in putting me first, I had to put that job out the door. I told myself in whatever way I had to, I was not going back to a 9-to-5. And I've talked about it before on here. God opened up a space for me to basically have an entire year all to myself, just to go back inside, to heal, to figure some stuff out, to listen to my brain, to do the work necessary to get to the point where I am today. So I needed that time and I needed that space to learn me, to learn what works for me, what doesn't work for me, what sets me off, what doesn't set me off, what stimulates me, what overstimulates me. I had to learn me, and I had to be so selfish for a year and completely push out anybody and anything that did not align with who it was that I wanted to be. Because again, I had never been put first. I had never put myself first. I was always thinking about the person in front of me. Always. I was over empathetic. I was over giving. And I had just basically reduced myself to nothing. And I had to put me first. I had to quit that job. I had to leave that relationship. I had to leave those friendships. I had to move to a different state and isolate and go into hermit mode to learn some stuff, to figure some stuff out, because I got a big mission in this world, and you do too. If you are magnetized here, you have a big mission in this world, and you got to do the inner work, because now that's on you, okay? God's going to do his part. God's going to put you in the spaces. God's going to open up the doorways. God's going to get you in isolation periods. Then you got to do your part. You got to give to you. You got to heal you. You got to figure you out. You got to learn your gifts. You got to learn your intuitive nudges. You got to learn how to listen to spirit. You got to learn how to tap into your inner guidance system. That's your work. God can only do part of it. You're the person in the 3D. You're the person driving the wheel. But I promise you, with every fiber of my being, if you were diagnosed ADHD and you're taking these pills and you feel like you are disconnected from yourself, you probably are. And there is a life out there for you where you don't have to take the medication and you can feel free. And your mind isn't going crazy, and you're not overstimulated. Your house isn't a wreck, and you're able to keep promises to yourself, and you're able to do the things that your entire life you thought you couldn't, because you are so powerful up here. You are so powerful. You can do it. It's not super easy. It takes time. It takes devotion. It takes dedication, but you're worth it. You're going to die with you, okay? You are going to die with you. This is you and you for the rest of your life. So either you can face it head on and you can really get to the bottom of it and change the way you exist, or you can keep floating on about your life, taking your medicine, going on about your day. And if that's how you feel, this video probably is not for you. But I promise you, you're meant for more. I promise you, you're connected to something bigger. I promise you, you have a divine purpose and path over your life. I promise you, you're more than a job. I promise you, you're more than this ADHD. I promise you, you're more than this trauma. I promise you, you can get to the bottom of it. And if you need help, DM me. You are not alone. I know how lonely it feels. If you are like me, I know how lonely it feels. You're not alone. You just got a divine path that very few will actually take the time to walk down. Thanks for being here, and Godspeed on your adventure.